You're listening to Anywhere But Hollywood with Adam Campbell, empowering the independent filmmaker.
I thought this was just a fascinating conversation with Richard Trombly, who's an American expat filmmaker living in China, has been out there for a little over a decade now. And when he went out there, he had no job, no contacts, did not know the language, didn't speak it or read it. And yet in the last decade or so, he has actually managed to carve out a career for himself in the film industry in China. So if he can make it there, you can make it anywhere. This conversation runs a little bit on the long side, but it was such unique content, I really didn't want to cut anything. So here it is, my conversation with Richard Trombly. So yeah, I wanted to talk to you about, pretty much just about everything about your life. How did you end up in China in the first place?
Well, I was kind of politically active, and it was 2003, and I had been, because of the whole Bush election thing, which I had problems with, I kind of felt like this is going bad, and then we invaded Iraq, and it's like, man, I really want to leave the country.
Wow, so you're somebody who actually followed through on that threat. That's so rare.
Yeah. There's another person named Lara Lee, and who did Cultures of Resistance, which is an interesting website, and started. They're doing other things now, but it started with a movie called Cultures of Resistance, which was showing where people that what's happening in the U.S. that drove people like me and them out of the U.S. was that the corporate monoculture is taking over, and these people are causing the same companies are causing the same troubles everywhere, the same oil companies, the same Nestle, the same, and when the U.S. had what was clearly a corporate profit-making war, and even when the Germans invaded Poland in 38, whatever. But when World War II started, even they claimed the Poles fired the first shot, and Bush was, they could be a threat, so we better go over and beat them up. It's like, whoa, it's not like a war crime.
Nice.
So that made me want to leave the country. I was looking at going to India with a possible journalism thing. I'd been a journalist. And the job that I might have had in India fell through. We were already planning on leaving the country and heading towards Asia. So the next job that was available was at Shanghai Daily.
Oh, how did you locate the job?
I just started making calls in sort of in desperation, because the job I had lined up fell through, and contacted some news agencies. I had worked for Associated Press before and some other bigger news outlets, and I heard, no, well, we can hire you, but I think they're looking for someone at Shanghai Daily. Called them up, and they said, oh, yeah, come on over.
Oh, and at the time, you didn't speak any Chinese, I assume, right?
I didn't speak any Chinese. I was editing a paper, and I didn't plan on staying in China. But I'm like, yeah, I'll take this for a year, and then we'll get things sorted out.
And were you involved in film before you went out there?
My only involvement in film was that in college, I had been involved in student film projects. I'd taken a film and literature, film and theater as literature. Expecting that I might teach it in college someday. Never really felt that I'd really be making movies, but that was only at the very beginning of the video era, and it's the technology of filmmaking has changed so much that anyone can have it within their grasp to make a film.
I wonder actually if you and I were at the same college at the same time, because I went to UMass in the 80s, and we may have even taken some of the same classes together.
I was born in 1967, so...
Yeah, so we're about the same age, so I think we were...
Yeah, we're close. So it's possible we were wandering through the same through Dickinson at the same time or something.
Yeah.
If we ever go back to that time, I'll know.
You'll look for me.
Yeah.
So you got into film professionally once you were in China. So was it
the way I ended up, after when I came, the WHO had. The WTO had just been signed over in China, and they had said, in a typical way, they said, we'll open our media because that's the requirements, and let's just sign this contract right now, and we'll get to the opening the media. And so the WTO said, okay. And China was like, right, we're going to open our media. So I spent a year at Shanghai Daily, and then I did move on from that because the journalism didn't open, and I had hoped to become an assigning editor when I was there, and I trained their business writers to a degree, and then they really kind of wanted to put me on the sub editor desk, the copy editor desk, and I was like, I'm not in Asia just to do copy editing. Not that there's anything wrong with that job. It's a good job. But I was like, I wanted to be like, telling the big stories and everything. So I did some freelance reporting. I did some work for some other news outlets. And that led me over to being the Shanghai correspondent. Their bureaus in Beijing, but I was the Shanghai correspondent for The Hollywood Reporter, which is probably the number 2 magazine behind Variety, but it's one of the big American world-covering entertainment magazines, of course.
Have you noticed the change in tone of The Hollywood Reporter over the last several years? How it's become much more of a tabloid, it seems. It's like it's not so much an industry magazine anymore.
Yeah. It was on its way there. They were going very corporate. Nielsen was pushing it, squeezing profits from it, and it was a bit like Glengarry Glen Ross, where everything was about the salesman not getting much money, but like the best salesman would get one big prize. They were doing the same sort of thing, that all of their stringers, they were playing a thing with if you got certain articles, then on certain placement you get extra money, and it's like, well, wait a minute, overall we're all losing out. Yeah, but they're like, but you can compete with each other. It's like, well, why would we want to? We want all of our freelancers to do well,
Right.
So yeah.
So how did you end up? How did you make the transition into working in film there? I know you were
right.
Yeah.
So that kind of brought me over to film, and at the same time, I got the opportunity, along with my kids, to be extra. They were extras, and I was a named part with a couple of lines in The White Countess, which was the last of the Merchant Ivory films. And that was this sweeping epic, which was the logistics behind it in China were kind of crazy, but they did a World War II epic in Shanghai.
So is there a little bit of a big fish in a small pond phenomenon when you're an English-speaking actor in China?
If you are in Asia and you are foreign, you will end up in being at least an extra in a movie.
Okay.
But for me, that was like, oh yeah, this is what I wanted to do. But I never thought I'd go from Belchertown, Massachusetts, Amherst, Massachusetts to I'm just going to go over to LA and say, would you like fries with that, sir? And but I'm really a filmmaker.
Right.
I didn't see that. But over here, I'm doing the editing stuff. I got involved with some film circle people, and someone had said, hey, you're an editor and a writer. and with now international experience, and about film. So would you be able to edit this really bad that's green lighted? And I said, yeah.
Oh.
And so I did some edit on a film like right before it was going to be shot, and helped improve the script some, and then I got a chance to write another script that got published. It got produced, and I've done a lot of other little jobs with editing or doing subtitling, and the translation and subtitling of some films, of festival proposals and things for a lot of people. And at the same time, I love community theater, and I kept that connection in the States when I was working as a journalist, instead of doing film or something. And so over here, there was no chance to do community theater. And I met a bunch of other, actor types from being in some short films and some feature films. And, we were like, God, there's no community theater in English. We could go see Cats in a big stadium, but we don't want to see Cats, number one.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not the same experience to see a play in a big theater. And
do they translate all the lyrics of Cats, for example, or is it all in English? Just out of curiosity.
They haven't. They usually do all in English, and they have a running little translator bar at the bottom. So but there's some wonderful productions that happen in Chinese language here, mm-hmm. that they do translate, and they've got amazing actors in China on stage, and they're such consummate professionals, and they don't make any money hardly doing it. They're wonderful people to know, because they're so devoted to it, and money's not the object. There's a real art thing in China that is beautiful, that there are some people who are just so devoted to doing their art.
Hmm. And is the acting style for the in these Chinese theatrical productions similar to American style, or is it more like tradition based? Or
I'd have to say the actors are a bit more tradition based here. Mm-hmm. Because of the rigid educational system. Mm-hmm. I'd say that it's starting to evolve finally, but that they probably are a little bit more conservative in their acting.
Do you find that's true of the film actors as well that you've worked with?
It's especially clear in the film acting. If you see like a modern, in the States, you see a modern Shakespeare company. They're so different than they were when we were younger.
Right.
Where people used to approach Shakespeare like, oh, it's Shakespeare.
Yeah, right.
And now it's become, people have been, wait a minute, this was the common man's theater. We're not going to degrade it, but at the same time, we're going to make it more approachable, mm-hmm. more natural, and
with the justification,
less stage-like.
With the justification that that's probably what it was like back in the day when it was popular entertainment back in the day.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so on stage, everything's a little bit more, almost, people have that Beijing opera sort of, very stage thing. And so they probably bring a little bit too much, and on stage it doesn't come out as much, but sometimes you do find that the film actors it's really hard to get them in touch with real emotion, because they really want to be acting. Mm-hmm. And it's like, well, if people know you're acting, it's probably not what we want to see on film.
Right. Right. And film tends to be a much more understated style of acting too. And if they're used to this kind of regimented, I don't know if that's the right word, but this kind of traditional style of theatrical acting, it must be kind of hard to dial it down, I would think. It
is. It is. And like I have to talk to my actors a little bit before before we shoot with them about what style of acting, I want from them. And one of them said, "But no one would know I'm acting." Yes.
So you think it's evolving? Do you think that's partially because of that there are more Western style films coming in?
It's definitely changing. I mean, the younger people are watching all the videos, and probably some of the more self-taught ones are, get it more. Mm-hmm. The Beijing Film Academy, teaches a very, very party line idea of what films are, which is probably about 20 years behind. Every general is 20 years behind the technology of the war that's being fought.
Sure.
And that's kind of what's happening from the Beijing Film Academy. A few years back, the Shanghai Film Festival had a seminar on making, you should make movies that audiences actually want to see. Wow, you need a seminar for that?
What a concept.
Because actually, and I mean, I joked about it to a Beijing friend from Beijing Film Academy, and they said, no, I mean, we were taught by our professors that we shouldn't think about the audience because we're the artists and we should give them what we think they need.
So do you think the films that have crossed over, like for example, obviously Crouching Tiger or House of Flying Daggers, do you think that those are uncharacteristic of Chinese film? That what do you think it is about them that's more approachable for Western audiences?
Well, I mean, most of what people think of as Chinese films are actually Shaw Brothers, Bruce Lee and stuff.
Sure.
Those are all Hong Kong. We've got other Hong Kong directors like Blueberry Nights. That's not really Chinese film. Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, Farewell My Concubine, things like that are they have. Yeah, I mean, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon is a martial arts film.
Yeah, so you got so that's universal. You got the action,
That's good. That's going to be a sell anyway. And as soon as you make it an artsy martial art film, it was like, wow, something new. It wasn't as cheesy as a Shaw Brother film.
Right.
Okay.
And so it had a novelty in the early 2000s. Yeah. I mean, I remember when that came out, a lot of people in China, at least the reactions that I read in China were that it's like, we've been doing this for decades. What's the big deal?
Right. I mean, no one had seen Wire Work, and actually, no one ever wants to see it again.
Right. Right. Of course, now that's all slipped into all the superhero movies. It all looks like that.
Right.
But even films like have you seen The Road Home?
I love The Road Home.
Yeah, one of my favorite movies. I love that movie. But that's got also the acting in that is very beautiful and subtle too.
Yeah.
And actually we just watched Electric Shadows a few nights ago. Have you seen that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Another one. I mean, but that's also very, I think, typically Chinese in the kind of pathos of it, the tragedy of it.
Right.
Which also I think is pretty characteristic of a lot of Chinese stories.
Right. And let's see.
Yeah, I think you were about to say something.
Temptress Moon was, another one of those few movies that really can be accessible to an audience beyond China. But there's very few directors who are making anything that really beyond China that you can really watch. They made a few things, like they tried to make Red Cliff, which is the Three Kingdoms, and it was John Woo directing it. But they tried so hard to make it classic that Chinese people loved it. It did great in China, but that's a thing that could have crossed over, but it was just done in such a Chinese style that it bombed in the U.S.
I'm surprised there aren't more crossover successes. For example, when we were there in late 2009, Mulan was playing the live action version of Mulan, which I finally watched here a couple of years ago, and that seemed to me like it would have been, at least the idea of a Mulan movie would have been a perfectly marketable crossover proposition, but it didn't go anywhere.
Right.
It's here.
No, it unfortunately didn't. It's again, it's a very local sensibility that that Chinese market is that they miss some of the international filmmaking style. It's about the script. It's about there's always touches that take people out of the out of the fourth wall.
Mm-hmm.
The something with the acting or the staging makes you kind of realize, oh, we're in a movie.
Right. This kind of the Brechtian thing, like one of my OP friends, cinematographer friends, he talks about these productions he's in and like so many good elements to it, and he tries so hard to make the shots good and everything, and then he's like, even though these directors are brilliant, devoted, intelligent guys, and then the way they set something up, you just don't believe what's happening in front of the camera. So,
it sells okay in the Chinese market because they are more used to that. They don't have a concept of long traditional concept of literature in all Asia.
Mm-hmm.
The development of the novel and literature was very much a Western thing, from the Greeks and Romans through through our own European backgrounds to American literature. They have histories that went on for for volume after volume after volume until the author died. And that's why it ended, as opposed to it ending at a right time. I mean, we even took the Arthurian legend and we made it fit a heroic cycle.
Mm-hmm.
And if you read some of the White Book and things like that, there's some fairly messy tales written around the same time of Gawain and the Green Knight.
Mm-hmm.
Some things that are pretty not tight literature, Beowulf style, but even the bardic tradition made things into a tighter story structure.
Right. You got to wonder why for example, or even Japan and Korea both seem to be a little more compatible culturally with the West. At least there seem to be more imports or exports from those areas.
It's kind of like when Emperor Qianlong, the first emperor who, the ambassador McCartney went to China, the first European embassy.
I saw that picture of you. I saw that
set up trade.
I saw that picture of you as McCartney, by the way.
Yes.
Sorry, go on.
Which is hilarious. To be the guy who didn't bow to the emperor. I love it. I consider myself a bit of a rebel to the nobles of the world. Not quite Hunter S. Thompson, but I like to stick it to them a little bit. So yeah, I actually on film didn't bow to Qianlong, but the Europeans brought European modern knowledge and things, and the emperor said, "Oh, you want to be a tribute state?" And it's like, no. You brought toys. Looks like valuable toys. They're not toys. They're science. Whatever, little people. We're China, and I mean, China was presented with the alphabet, and I mean, most things that were advances, people developed in more than one place. Mm-hmm. Archaeologists have found, like, okay, we credited this race with this invention, but actually it was invented here and here and here. As well in these societies that died out. So it's like, okay, human ingenuity is pretty, pretty common, but the alphabet was made once.
Mm-hmm.
And then, other people adopted it, changed it, but they never had it before they saw it. And either they took it whole or like the Koreans, they made their own alphabet, but based on saying, hey, this alphabet thing's pretty good. And almost only the Chinese worldwide said, you know, that would make a lot of people able to read. Like, and so no, we better not do that.
So there's this. So there, it seems like there's this strong, maybe an unusually strong sense of cultural identity with China,
Yeah.
which maybe accounts for a lot of the places where they don't quite meet up with other parts of the world culturally.
Right. And I mean, as far as the film, and here's a point I was kind of pushing towards, is the China film industry. They talk a lot about wanting to do international stuff, but actually they don't need to, because it's like Bollywood. You ask a Bollywood director, like, well, how come you're making this stuff? Don't you want to be like internationally, you know? And they're like, why? We have Bollywood. We've got 1.5 million Indians who love our weird style of filmmaking.
Right, and there's money to be made from American films in China, but they're still limited to a very small percentage of the screens, right? Right,
and I mean, well, actually, I mean, they're limited by SARF to the most money that foreign films can make is 40% of the box office. And so that they always say, well, 60% of the box office this year was Chinese films. So the Chinese films are getting more powerful. It's like, you mandate it, that's going to be 60%.
Right. What do they do if it looks like a movie, like let's say Avatar, is making too much money? Do they just suddenly pull it without warning?
They pull all the other Chinese films while Avatar is playing, and then they put out all the Chinese films, you know, and then stop other foreign films coming in for a while. They didn't stop Avatar because that was, you know,
right. It was Avatar.
They got a nice kick out of that.
Yeah. So what's the office that does that? Who's actually in charge of manipulating that?
SARFT. It's SARFT, State Administration of Radio, Film, and Television.
I see. Where are they based? Beijing.
Beijing. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And you know, they've set this target that, you know, the Chinese films take a certain amount of the box office, and the rest of it goes to the limited number of foreign films, and that they will sometimes put a very big Chinese film and a big American one, so that it will limit the play of the foreign one.
Very interesting. All right, so let's talk about a little bit about some of your stuff. What are you working on right now?
Okay. What I'm working on right now, I recently finished a film called Analysis, which is a short film that is about a young girl who's a math genius, and we did a live action and some very intensive CGI and VFX to sort of get a piece of her fantasy world, and she's got maybe a little bit of her this own fantasy world of hers, which you might think might be a little bit like mild autism scale, like Asperger's syndrome or something, which, if you remember, Augustus, what's his name? Running with Scissors.
Augustus
they were Amherst people. Yeah, Burroughs. Yeah. They were Amherst people, and his younger brother had rather strong Asperger's, and this is something in my family we've dealt with, and I've got a genius daughter who's now at Tufts, and my kids were here with me in China, and so this is reflective of something about her, and it was inspired by Google Cloud Computing, the advances of computers that can play chess, and coming to the 40th anniversary of the Rubik's Cube. And the Rubik's Cube was actually made by Professor Rubik, not as a toy or a product, but it was to demonstrate group theory. And the idea of group theory is in a Rubik's Cube is you can, make 1,000 turns, but mathematically it's down to what your result is. And it doesn't matter how you get there, how many forward clicks or backward clicks you do.
Oh, I see.
So, if you're on a drill field doing military, left face, right face, about face, or stand still are the 4 things that you can do. And you could, to do a full circle, someone could say left face, left face, left face, left face, or you could just stay in place and do nothing, and the result's the same.
And so this figures into her, like she has a natural talent for this type
So what she's trying to do in her mind is to use the massive computing power to do like Isaac Asimov's Foundation, which was using one supercomputer to predict the future of humanity.
Wow. Uh-huh.
And she was trying to take it down to like, hey, I don't have to play chess anymore because no matter what the chessboard looks like, I can make the next move just by checking with the computer. That when you and I were kids, people had theories about what the best move for chess was, and there's no theory anymore. Blue wave determined exactly what the best move is from no matter what the board looks like. And anything else is really a mistake. And so my daughter even said, why would I ever play chess?
Wow.
Because, there's either you make the right move or you make a mistake. It's like, this isn't a game.
Oh, jeez.
And it doesn't take intelligence. It's about pattern recognition.
Well, yeah, like
you
in the
recognize
case
the
of
pattern, you move it.
in the case of the, that when was it? A few years ago that the computer finally beat a human.
Right.
And but I mean, the argument was that well, it's not real chess. It's just brute force. It's brute calculations, right? And the force of calculation, as opposed to intuition.
Right. But when you get to different algorithms, at a certain point, you get to. I worked with some youth at risk in the United States, and I'm a pretty smart guy, and I played chess, and I know I've read books on it, I studied it, and stuff. I would sit to spend a couple minutes looking at a chessboard and then think about which move to make. A New York City tough kid who used to sit in the park and watch old Jewish men play.
Yeah.
Little tough black kid. He wouldn't even look at me for the 2 minutes I did it. He wasn't watching the board because this is his thing. He would look away, and then he'd look at the board. That picture was in his mind. He would move instantly within a second.
Wow.
And he'd make a great move, and I'd go, oh, jeez.
Wow.
And I mean, this guy was. I've had salads that had more mentally going on than this kid most of the time.
That's very interesting. So.
And yeah. So anyway, she tries to do the whole human reaction thing. She's got Asperger's syndrome mildly, so she doesn't connect well with the other kids at school. And so she's like, a computer could figure it all out and just give me the answer, and I wouldn't have to know about why kids do stuff. I could just get the answer.
God, this sounds like it would be an interesting feature idea, actually. I know it's a short.
It'd be great for a feature, and I would have done it as a feature because I've done shorts before, and I know that you can never sell a short. And, it's like, this could be a feature, but guess what? I have this much money.
Yeah, sure. Not to mention that your star presumably is going to age out eventually, right? I mean, I saw you were talking about the film 2 years ago.
This was something that it took a long time to get the post-production done because we didn't have money, and the value of what we were doing was, many times what we paid, and I was working very hard to keep things going and work with my graphics guy, and we took a lot of jobs just to keep bread on the table, and this is what we did on, after 11 o'clock at night, after you've done the paying job.
Right.
And this has been our labor of love to get through, and it really started as something that I'd been pushing a feature film, one of my own scripts, and I got a lot of guff of like, yeah, but we don't know you as a director.
I mean, like working through whatever the studio system is in Beijing, or do you mean as an independent production?
Trying to get the money. People were even like looking at the script and going, "Well, we could probably put another director on it." And I was like, "I know what's going to happen to it. No, you're not doing my script.
Right.
I'm the only one who's going to direct this because I actually care about this one. I can write other scripts for you that you can do what you want with, but not this script."
Right.
And they're like, "Well, your demo reel doesn't." So I was like, "All right, well, let's do a quick, easy, genius, wonderful, the tour de force of what I can do directing." And it was supposed to be quick, and then
2 years later,
we came up with this one, and it's like, well, this won't be as quick as we want, but it's kind of good. It's kind of compelling, and so we had to go through with it, and it's now finally made it to some international film festivals.
Oh, so it is actually finished. Oh, good.
It's finished, except for we were accepted in a few film festivals. It played at one just in its preview format, and we've got just right now we're redoing our computer system so that we can do the final output.
Mm-hmm.
And so and we're going to send that off to the film festivals that we're going to.
So what is the film community like in Beijing? Is it are you pretty much is the expat community its own film community, or is there some overlap with native film community? How does that work?
Beijing is kind of insular. It's very hard to get into that as a foreigner. Mm-hmm. There is a very tight group of people up there who are foreign actors, and most of them have really good Chinese, and they know all the agents, and the whole agent system is backwards here.
How's that?
In the United States, you have an agent who works for you. They get you work. You happily give them your pound of flesh because they work hard for getting you jobs. Mm. Here, you're delivered as a commodity. And you have to have multiple agents because some agents have better contacts for certain producers than others do. And there's a network of actors who, it's not a union, but they try to share and instead of compete and go, "Hi, I found out who's the agent for this." No, not going to tell anyone. They actually try to tell each other, "Hey, this is the agent working on this movie," or "Hey, did you find out about this feature that's coming?" And they share all that information, and they try to get each other working as much as possible.
Oh, that's interesting. Is there ever an opportunity to get the agents to work against each other to your advantage? I know that sounds mercenary, but I mean, like, do you know what I'm saying? So, like, you can to get them to compete against one another, or is it just they each have their own little fiefdoms that they?
Sometimes one agent is working, and you find out what rate he's doing, and I'm sure some playing back and forth because I've found out like one getting an offer to do something for like 1,000, then getting called for someone else and getting offered 2,000, and going, "Oh, the other guy was pocketing 1,000 on me,"
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, great.
Yeah.
So you kind of remember that, you share that, you go, "Oh yeah, that is pretty fair, that one." Yeah.
So you've been out there now how long? 14 years? Wait, no, 11 years. 11 years, right?
11 years. 11 years.
I forgot what year it was.
Right. Yeah.
But so now, even after all this time, and that's all in Shanghai that you've been there, right?
I lived 3 years in Beijing. I've been back 1 year, so that interim 3 years, I'd been in Shanghai, and there's a different movie industry in Shanghai. Shanghai was the original Chinese movie industry that actually was the stuff that was coming out before the communist takeover. They produced beautiful movies here, and you could put them side by side with anything that was coming out of Hollywood at the time, and the volume of films was similar. They were really vibrant, and then things changed here, and when the World War II happened, the Japanese, what happened in China was really harsh, and then the communist takeover, and filmmaking became a state thing, so it became Beijing. Yes. And Shanghai's never stopped having, a film industry, but it's really revitalized recently, and it's much more open to the foreigners in Shanghai.
So there's a little bit more overlap with the industry. Yeah, in Shanghai.
There's more overlap. There's more acceptance of international culture in Shanghai in general, because Shanghai was a fishing village until late 1800s, and the foreigners in the Opium War made it a city.
Right. So it's always these coastal areas that.
Yeah. Well, we're not quite cultural. I mean, Shanghai.
As I say that, I'm looking it up on the map.
Yeah. Right. Shanghai's kind of like London. I mean, London was a port city, but back in the day, that when you didn't have motors on boats, you sailed it to be really safe. You sailed up into a really protected harbor, and other countries' warships couldn't blast you. So Shanghai means up from the ocean, up away from the ocean. Shang is up and Hai is ocean, ocean.
Okay. So I'm curious. Can you talk about
more than you want to know?
No. I'd love to know more even. Can you talk about your trip to Tibet last year and the stuff you're working on now as far as related?
That was actually Nepal.
Oh, I'm sorry, Nepal. Okay. No.
Yeah, it was Nepal, and through the magic of social media, you get lots of weird contacts, and occasionally something really big pans out. And there's a guy who had contacted me, and he said, "Why don't you make a movie about Nepal?" And I was like, "Okay, I'm not a documentary filmmaker in general. I used to be a reporter. I do some documentary stuff, but I'm pursuing fiction film. So it would have to be really big for me to want to actually devote myself to a feature, doing a big feature thing on documentary." And so he said, "Well, here's my story." And then I was like, I'm like, okay, I want to go to Nepal.
So is this what you're working on now is a potential follow-up to that?
It's a follow-up to that, and basically you're going to go to a film festival and try to get something for a feature film. You bring your script, you bring all your vision stuff, and you don't pay any money into it until you get funded. So, and film festivals fund good ideas on paper. For a documentary film, since everyone's got an idea for a documentary, they don't want to hear an idea. They only want to see some footage you've got. So unless you put some skin in the game, you will never get funding for a documentary film. Unless you've got governmental contacts or college contacts or something. So I self-funded going for 10 days and taking my camera and my microphone and just catching some footage. And the amazing story there is that there's a guy in Kathmandu, the capital city, the only real big city in Nepal, who came from the far west of Nepal. Nepal is the second poorest country in the world next to, I think it's Ethiopia. Wow. And he went to Kathmandu it took him a month of walking. Now, this is a country that's no bigger, that's smaller than Taiwan.
Mm-hmm.
And it took him 30 days because of the mountains and stuff to walk to the capital.
Wow.
Because there was no road. And in Kathmandu, he met roads. And then, over time, since he had left his village, which was the capital seat of his province, it didn't have a road going to it. It had a mule trail.
Oh my gosh! Wow.
And he saw these cities which before, these other towns which hadn't had a road to them, get roads, and he's like, I got to get me a road for my village. It sounds hilarious, but I mean, like, the idea, like, wow, roads are a good thing. And this was at the same time as, right, the RNC, remember there, I made it myself?
Yeah.
This was the same time, and they were going like, the government doesn't do anything. And, I mean, Nepal was a kingdom until 5 years ago.
Wow.
And they overthrew the monarchy finally. And they have a government, and that started road building. I mean,
yeah.
It really was like, wow, this is very clear that this is a big deal. And so this guy, at the time, the Maoist rebels were still there, and it was still the monarchy. But he did get the road to his place as the road had gone, except for like 30 miles away from his home. It's a river valley, and there was solid rock, so there's no way they could make the road. And there's a airstrip up in his little capital city that government planes could go into for to bring in like UN workers or something. Mm-hmm. So unless you're going to fly something in, there was no way to get it there. And he wanted them to send explosives and blow up so that the road could go up to his village, but there were Maoist rebels. And so the government said, we're not giving you explosives because the Maoist rebels will take them and blow up the capital. And so he said, well, there's an airport, fly it in. No one from this city is going to is going to let the Maoist rebels take the explosives because they want the road.
Wow. And
they're like, yeah, we're going to put explosives in a plane. Do you know what that is? That's a bomb. I mean, do you remember 9/11? That was explosives in a plane. Hello.
Yeah.
And he kept asking, and they were annoyed. And then finally, the official said, "If you sit in the plane with a box of explosives on your lap, we'll do it." And he said, "Okay."
Oh.
And then they were like, "Oh, come on, we weren't serious." He's like, "You said you'd do it. I'm going to get in the plane. You're going to fill the plane." And then in the end, they did.
Wow. So this is what the documentary is about, this guy?
I went there going, it's like, okay, maybe the story's dead because the road was already built to his village. And so I'm like, all right, I'm going to put what's in my pocket, instead of like putting that last bit into hurrying and getting my analysis done. I went off to Nepal to chase this, and turns out the road story isn't done. The road was actually supposed to go all the way to China. And political bickering, they reached a valley 20 kilometers outside this city, and the road could go in either valley up to Tibet and connect to a highway. And both places realized that wherever the road went, prosperity did. And there's a 50-mile wilderness between the border, between this valley where this road stops. There's one village just up the river valley, and then wilderness. Nobody lives for 50 miles until you get to the Chinese border. And so both places are like, wow, people are going to go from China to India. This is going to be the road from China to India. It will all go through our village. They fought so hard that the corrupt officials said, okay, you people can't agree. I'm taking the money. I'm going to, have some nice dinners, buy myself a car, and maybe a few nights with, anyway. So the money went away, and the road went away. And it's kind of stalled, but at the same time, even though there was a bridge, even though there was a road right to that village, there was still a river, and one of those Indiana Jones cable bridges, so that anything that arrived by truck. I mean, now there was buses that go down the hill, and there were, they were delivering cement, but guys had to carry the bag of cement, one bag at a time, down the hill to the Indiana Jones cable bridge, and then up the other side. While I was there, I got that they're actually extending this road to finally go over a bridge that will go into the city. And by city, it's 800 houses.
Wow.
They call that a city. It's got over 800 houses. Wow.
So last year, did you get a lot of footage? I mean, how is this? You expect this is going to be?
I was there for 10 days and filming like all day. I mean, I had HD camera with like these 30, with 4 32 gigabyte memory cards, and I was filling like all the cards every day.
So there was no I mean, it's a very poor area, but there was no problem getting power, or did you have to work with a generator, or what?
This was amazing. This was absolutely amazing, because the day I arrived, the power went down by the municipal power went down, and it was down the whole time I was there. And I was like, oh my God, I run on power. And he's like, well, you're lucky because so many people don't trust the power. There's all these people have solar deep cell batteries.
Oh, wow. Wow.
And so there were people who had internet where there was not even wires to their house.
That's amazing.
We're on mountaintops where and it's amazing because of how the poor people were. Most people are still subsistence there. When I was introduced to anyone, my guide was telling me what caste they were and how many months of the year they were able to grow food.
Wow.
For themselves. He's like, oh, these people only grow 8 months of food. They have to do manual labor for other people the rest of the time, and they get paid in food.
Wow.
Ugh. And so people had moved up the side of the mountains, and it's all rainforest, so even way up the mountains, people were living and making terraced farmland. And this is so treacherous, but so I mean, every night I was going from battery to battery, and we were getting up at 5 a.m. and walking all day, and then at 11 o'clock at night, after we sat and talked with people, there's no hotels. We were staying in people's houses, eating their food, and they didn't ask a penny for it. And like at 11 o'clock at night, I was spending 2 hours transferring footage, backing it up, and erasing my memory cards and charging up the batteries for my camera.
So when you go back, or if this works out that you go back, is it just going to be a continuation of the same story, or is it meant to be a year later?
A year later, now that bridge is going to be finished. I got footage of them making the bridge, and there were cement buildings. There were now a few buildings that were being made out of poured cement, and their footprint was, of course, larger than most of the buildings of those 800 homes are stone wall construction with wood roofs that you can see up through, and sod. Some of them sod floors, and they're being replaced. 8 or 10 of these buildings are being removed, and they're putting in a cement building of with 3-floor height, and those will get bigger for sure. And now they're going to be able to drive a truck over that bridge and bring a cement mixer there. Wow.
So what do you do with? So is this for commission? Is this a commissioned project, or is it still kind of a spec project?
I'm here now as it looks like I'm getting funding to do something for one of the government organizations, and an NGO there, and getting some funding for going back, and I will be producing something for them, and at the same time, I'm using footage from my previous trip to augment this filming for them, and so I'll use some of the footage from from this to build up my overall feature project
I see.
on the road. And so this one's actually going to be on poverty alleviation in Nepal.
Wow.
Which is something I'm really concerned about because it's a beautiful place with wonderful people, and they're so poor. Oh my God, so poor. And they're landlocked between India and China. And they're stuck between Himalayan mountains. So it's a really hard life there. But there's some wonderful resources there that if they could develop their farming and for cash crops, right now that they don't, there's hardly any green vegetables in their diet because they don't want something that's only going to be ripe for a short period of time.
Mm-hmm.
So like every meal is cucumbers and peppers and grains.
Wow.
Because cucumbers last a long time,
Right.
peppers last a long time,
Right.
and grains can be safe. But you don't see a lot of green unless it's pickled. What greens they grow, they grow a little bit of it, but they pickle that, and you get just enough, just barely a bit of green in your diet. It's
So is there
very repetitive diet.
are they generally healthy there? I mean, relatively speaking, or
the women there are so beautiful until they're 25 and they've had their 2 children already by 25, and wow, it's taken so much out of their body that because they're so undernourished. They're I mean, we used to see pictures of Chinese people being so thin. I mean, and if you look back at some of the old Chinese movies, the people are so thin.
right?
And you're looking at some pretty robust. I mean, compared to Americans, they're very thin, but some robustly healthy people in China.
Right.
Also very active, so they still stay pretty thin, and even with the diet. But in Nepal, they're very, very thin and malnourished, with that limited diet that they just want to make sure they've got, food lasting through the year.
Sure. So the documentary about the road, what's the ultimate destination for that thing? How's it going to be exhibited?
I'm making a short 10-minute film from that, and I didn't feel I really had enough from that first trip there, and I was anxious to get the bridge filmed and to see what's happening now that trucks can go into that city. I wanted those changes. Mm-hmm. And ultimately this road project to China is not, it's not dead, but what's going to happen with it. So I'm following it, and I think with this trip back and having more than a year's space of time to look at it, this is a 10-minute trailer of this teaser can go to a film festival.
Right.
Like there's a Guangzhou film festival that you'll get all the major things like Nat Geo and Discovery and BBC documentary, CCTV China documentary channel. All of these outlets are there, and so it's a great chance to present to them or to go to Rotterdam Film Festival, and hopefully try to win funding for it. Because I think it's still a great story, and like I said, I was reluctant to get into documentary filmmaking because it's so much work, and the good documentary filmmakers are so devoted. And
but the stuff I've seen of yours has a documentary feel to it anyway. I mean, well, sorry, obviously the Back Streets videos are documentary, but I mean, even the dramatic stuff I've seen too. You're just letting the actors tell the story, just be themselves for the most part, and your camera's there as an observer.
Right. I mean, and one of my favorite filmmakers also came from being a journalist, and the stuff he makes looks Koreeda. His name is Koreeda. and he did a movie called Nobody Knows Who, which actually, and it looks, I mean, obviously it was funded, so it's cleaner than Waiting, but there's so many similarities to the Waiting. In the same way he photographed children, some of the touches that he put in, it's like, wow, similar thoughts. And he came from being a journalist, and so did I. So
do you find that it's easier with children to get that naturalistic performance than it is with adults out there?
I love working with kids, because they don't have any hang-ups yet, and they're really genuine in trying to perform, and either they can do it or they can't. Right. There's no pretending. So when there's a thing with range, I mean, casting is everything if you're working with kids. But if you've got a kid who can do it, and kids can do a lot. It's amazing what kids can understand, what they can grasp, and what they can do. The one tip that I always tell people about working with kids, at least in my experience with them, is always keep the camera rolling no matter what. Like when you say cut, you're not really cutting. Just keep that camera rolling, because there's always so much stuff, on the B-roll that you can use. At least I've found. There is, absolutely, and I mean, with sometimes you keep the film rolling during the test, during the practice,
right?
Because sometimes that's where they got it, and then they get something in their mind, and you're not going to get it again.
Exactly. So, all right. So we should probably bring this in for a landing soon. But I just wanted to ask you a couple of questions. So, what would you say are the biggest challenges, or what is one of the biggest challenges of working from China or from another country in general as an expat American?
You're always going to be an outsider of the culture, and that led to some of the best movies made in the U.S. Is when a foreign filmmaker comes in and makes a movie about America. It's what they choose in America, what they see. And I mean, like, what Ali has done for American films. He's done American films that are genuine, but like no other filmmaker would make.
Even the Hulk.
So if I mean, if he didn't make, he admits the Hulk had mistakes in it, but if he didn't make the Hulk, he wouldn't have made Life of Pi. He would have made mistakes in Life of Pi.
But even the Hulk, I mean, it's got to be the most interesting superhero movie that's come out of the mainstream in the last 10 years or so. Anyway.
But you want to know what? He changed the successful ones that came later, because he took such an art approach to, it's kind of like what happened in the graphic novel. He took a superhero film, and he what he said later was he realized he forgot one thing. He didn't grow up with comic books, so he forgot they were supposed to be fun.
Right. Yeah, it's almost like he stretched it so
and you
far.
See, Avengers or something has that, but those superhero movies grew up after the Hulk,
right?
Because it could go there. I mean, and for God's sakes, we had a critique of Bush in Thor, because it was done by Kenneth Branagh, for God's sakes.
Right.
Wow. I mean, Branagh, he wouldn't have directed that movie if they didn't have Ang Lee doing Hulk.
Right, exactly. It's like they pushed the boundaries so far out that anything after that is almost conservative.
Yeah, so you got to rein it back in, because it's like, Ang Lee, whoa, dude, too much.
Exactly.
He knows it. Yeah, I love the quote. Oh, superhero movies were supposed to be fun.
Oh, why didn't nobody mention that? Of course, tell DC and Warner Brothers that too. They haven't figured that out.
Right. So, but yeah, I mean, to genuinely approach a foreign culture, you've got that. I'll always be an outsider, and that's. I admit, a big trouble I had in Beijing. I could go in the right circles, but to actually crack Beijing, I found it very hard, and I've got wonderful connections there, but I'm going to shoot in Shanghai, and I'm going to use Shanghai, the Shanghai creative staff that I've got, and then try to keep, I'm keeping the lines of connection that I developed when living in Beijing for 3 years. Valuable experience, but I don't think I could be a Beijing insider. And, I think there is a place in the Shanghai world that I can exploit and move forward in. And I've got a great team of people I'm working with that, we've made a pretty solid commitment here with that graphic studio moving forward, and we want to be doing feature films here.
So you're talking about the graphic studio that did the animation for Analysis?
Right.
And so that's turning into an ongoing concern.
We've got an amazing. This project was no matter what else this project did, it was a great success in bringing together an animator who has deep experience in the classic, cell animate 2D animation.
This is I'm sorry, I forgot his name. You mentioned
Pierre de Cells.
Right.
Yeah, and bringing together and Tim Giovanni, who founded Crashdown Studio, who brings a wealth of modern 3D animation. Not 3D shooting, but 3D animated things, and my own depth of storytelling. Bringing that all together is something that gives us a lot of opportunity, and we've got more projects on the way now that Analysis is off the table, and we've got some freedom, freeing ourselves up from corporate the jobs to take on some more creative things.
How's your Mandarin, by the way, now after all this time?
It's slow to progress. I get by with it, but in some ways I'm still learning English to be writing at the level I'm writing, and so good writers are practicing and improving their native language when they're in their 50s and 60s.
Well, when I found out that Nabokov spoke English as a second language, that blew my mind.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That is what, like Lolita is one of the most sophisticated pieces of writing in the English language, and the guy wrote it in his second language.
That's so rare because usually even translators primarily only translate in one direction when they're when you're at a level of literature translation, not corporate PR translation or something. When you're doing real solid cultural translations, most academia only translate into their native language. They read well enough to appreciate the beauty of a foreign author, and they try to elevate their language to match the same beauty in their native tongue, but they wouldn't be able to write that the other way.
Do you read Chinese, or is it just conversational?
I'm mostly conversational because again the writing system is hard.
Yeah.
And that's been a huge limitation. When you learn Chinese, you have to learn 2 languages because there's 80 different dialects that are mutually unintelligible that are spoken in the China world, and they all use the same writing.
Wow.
It was forced as the Chinese empire and culture was pressed upon other people. They had to accept the writing system because the languages didn't work out, so their lingua franca was the written word.
I suspect in Shanghai there's a lot of bilingual stuff, though, right? I mean, I know there was in
so much bilingual stuff, and I mean, in Shanghai, in Beijing, I was able to really do a lot better progressing my language, because in Shanghai, I try to, whenever I try to speak Chinese, then, they're like, yeah, okay, that's pretty good, Rich. Now let's go to English.
Right, because they all want to learn English, of course.
I want my English better anyway, and you're an editor, and you've taught at college,
That's
know?
Right.
And so, like, how many opportunities do I get? Most English teachers are, most English teachers are just native speakers in the program here. So it's like, yeah, you're one of the only people who can teach me a higher level of English. And so, that being overworked and overscheduled, it's easy to fall into that. Okay, yeah, I'm just going to speak English because that's easier.
Yeah.
I've got the language for working on the film set. That set vocabulary I have. So I can, but I do rely very heavily on working with a DOP or assistant director who is very bilingual and really knows what I want in script, and I learn, of course, my script. I write in English. I work with people to translate it, and
So how is that working? So you're writing a script in English, and then you're working with a translator to translate it into Mandarin. Is that right?
I usually work with more than one person to do the translation, because other people, different people will translate in a different way, and then we'll hash out what they each think I was saying in English, and what the finer points of each of their very good and acceptable translations were. And then we go, okay, that's this, and we all learn a lot more about our language in the process. And then during shooting, actors sometimes improvise.
How do you keep track of that, right, when you're not even speaking the right?
And so I know my script well enough to know that they didn't say exactly what I said, and so I have to go, okay, assistant director, come over here. They just said this, and and they're like, yeah, it covers it, or nope, yeah, that's not going to do it.
Jeez, yeah. So I mean, I guess it works when you have multiple translators, and then you can reach kind of a consensus, right? And you can, yeah. Wow,
and
that's something I never even thought about working in another language. That is tough.
Yeah, and I mean, it's hard over here that the budgets are smaller than Hollywood by far, and so even if you are working on a feature film, that they work crews hard, and I think part of the quality about we were talking about whether films can make it abroad or not. Part of it is we're seeing budgets go up here because they're building so many theaters that finally things can have a big enough budget. But before, they were turning out movies in like 20 days and working people 16-hour days easily.
That's amazing.
That still goes on. Quality you get when you're pushing over 16 hours, obviously,
right.
People at the end are like, hardly even care what's happening.
Unless you're Stanley Kubrick and you're doing it intentionally.
Right. Right. But they're just, yeah. And so that's at least one thing that I try to do is try to respect the crew a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. So last question for you, and we'll finish this up because it's been a real, it's going to be a great conversation. So if you were just dropped into another country, let's say it wasn't China, let's say it was another non-English speaking, let's say India. What would be and you're looking to continue your career as a filmmaker, and you didn't speak the language, what would be the first couple of things you would do?
Let's see. I would go to one of the bigger cities where there's some art scene, and I would attend some art events and try to communicate with as many people as possible, and to find the people who are interested in communicating with the expat crowd, and you know, there's always a circle of people. I mean, I lived in Cologne for a while, Cologne, Germany, and you just gravitate to this group of people who are the more open local people and a mix of people from around the world who are expats in that city, and some of them are going to be artists and painters and things, and you're going to find yourself in these inspiring people, and wow, it's really hard to think about going back to the picket fence after you've spent enough time abroad, because you are meeting these people who, you know, it's not like it's just that they're the people who didn't fit in,
right?
And that's why we're expats. It's not
right.
that we're smarter. It's not that we're, you know, have great skills. We didn't fit in, and you know, so we're making do other ways, and that brings about a lot of creativity, and by necessity, perhaps.
Yeah. That's
because as a foreigner, you have to somehow justify why you're making a living in any foreign country.
right, right.
And either you're performing something that local people aren't doing, or you're willing to do the lowest jobs that they're not. One way or another, maybe sometimes a mix.
Right.
You make your way through, and you know, there is, you know, any of these cities where something's happening. And you know, it's funny you mentioned India, because I just did something with some Indian filmmakers that that I'm in contact with. I'd love to get, you know, something going, playing around with the culture, India and Chinese cultures. That they touch each other through Tibet, you know, and there's somehow such separate worlds, and yeah, so it'd be fun to play with. And I ended up doing some Chinese shot things for a feature film that's happening in that's screening in India on September 26th.
Oh, right. I think you mentioned that the other day. Do you want to talk about that real quick, and then we'll finish up?
Really, really tiny thing. I thought a few things so that this guy could have a feeling that his it's a very small movie. It's only going to play in one province of India, probably, unless it catches on. It could go everywhere, but yeah, it's tiny, so it probably won't. But this first-time director, really bootstrapped this kind of a sci-fi-ish film. He came out as an engineering student, so it's got an engineering student who uses technology to the point of the science fiction, and he saves his home province, and so the distributors are bringing this movie in, and I shot some scenes with the various foreigners here and some Chinese people to be like it was the whole world's watching, because this danger that he's saving India from is also going to endanger the world, and and so I was a chance for him to have where he is, there really isn't a big foreign population, so he didn't have any connections to bring in anyone that would make it look like there were foreigners being watching the TV or the newscasters or stuff like that. So
did he find you over Facebook or something, or maybe not Facebook, but whatever?
through the LinkedIn, the
LinkedIn.
a little bit more, professional networking, but it's the same thing, yeah. And so that developing that, we commiserated over the filmmaking. He had offered to do some support on a couple little corporate projects that I was working on, and then so I was happy to help him out with this, and it's cool to have a credit, for a second unit for an Indian film.
Sure. That's so cool.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Richard.
I don't know.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
So, yeah. No worries. Yeah.
I just wanted to say thank you. I mean, this is running a little bit long, but it's so valuable, and I really appreciate it. And I'd like to follow up with you again in the future.
Anytime, of course. And people have to tell me to shut up. I used to be a reporter, so
I got the impression that you were, from your Facebook posts and your videos, I got the impression you were a very quiet guy, but I guess not.
I found that instead of asking questions at people get very nervous around reporters.
Uh-huh.
And so I found that I just chatted with people and put them at their ease, and they'd tell me things that I would sometimes have to, since I wasn't trying to do exposés, and like go, haha, you said this to a reporter, now you're screwed.
Right.
I would sometimes just go like, wow, that's a great quote. Can you say it again so I can make sure I get it perfect?
Right.
And they go, I can't believe I just said that to a reporter. And I'm like, then maybe I misheard you. How about you say it again to me in the words you want to use, because I'm going to print something. So just make sure it's what you want me to hear.
Right. And that was effective.
Yeah. And then they'd go, oh boy. Yeah. Okay.
Very diplomatic.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Richard. I'll talk to you again before too long, and I'll certainly chat with you on Facebook, probably more frequently than you'd like. Okay. Thanks, Richard.
All right.
Bye-bye. And that was my conversation with Richard Trombly, and I want to thank him again for sharing some really unique and valuable insights about working outside of the country, working in another language, working far from home. This is information that is generally pretty hard to come by unless you've had the experience. So signing off, this is Adam Campbell for Anywhere But Hollywood. Till next time.
Visit anywherebuthollywood.com and join the community. Fill out a profile, share samples of your work, search for collaborators by skill or location. Anywherebuthollywood.com, empowering the independent filmmaker.